I grew up on the north side of Houston, Texas, in a hood called Acres Homes. You know, shout out to everybody in Acres Homes. And I had a very turbulent childhood and a very rough upbringing, which influenced me to become a rapper and tell my story.
You were born in Houston?
Yes, sir.
And still reside in Houston today?
Nah, I've been out here in Atlanta like the last 3.5 years.
And what was the reason for that move?
Well, I wanted to put myself in a position to be heard, you know what I mean? And like Atlanta's more of an industry town, and I knew that. And I just would always notice the camaraderie, the camaraderie amongst artists in Atlanta. So, you know what I mean? I felt like I'd just come out here and, you know, network a little bit, make some moves, you know, get on my grind.
Now, when it comes to this period of you growing up, you described it as turbulent and rough.
Yeah.
What was the roughest moment you experienced growing up, out of all the turbulent, rough stuff you may encounter?
I got bullied a lot growing up, and a lot of that was because I was so dark-skinned and I was real skinny and I looked like a nerd, like when I went to school and, you know, shit like that. And also, my story, like my parents, my original biological parents gave me up for an adoption when I was born. And my dad, he was a drug dealer, my biological dad. My biological mother was a prostitute. And like, it's crazy, man. So he knew my adopted dad from the drug game. And when I was born, he just gave me away to them. Like my original parents were never together. They was just having kids and just giving them away. So when I got to my adopted parents, like I thought they were my real parents. And my adopted parents were both blind. You know, they had a disability. My mother had been blind since she was like 5 years old. She had a tumor in her head that blinded her. My dad was a gangster from the streets of North Houston. He was real heavy in Acres Homes, and the way he went blind, he got shot in his face during the drug transaction. So, you know, that's what happened to him. So quite naturally, you know, growing up, certain people love to joke, your mama this, your daddy that. I just wasn't feeling shit like that. So, you know, I dealt with a lot of that. And like I said, when you look a certain way, like you're not really flashy, you poor, you can't afford name brands, people fuck with you about it. And that would like rub me the wrong way and piss me off. So, you know, I really didn't know how to handle it. So I found myself like getting in a lot of fights and shit like that. And, you know, I just realized how cruel people could be. That's pretty much, you know, what it was.
Now, I want to break several of these elements down that you laid out a second ago. First is when it came to the bullying, you would get physical.
It would. I'm from the era where things would get physical, like people would throw shit at you and, you know, stuff, well, at me, you know, stuff like that, or just walk up and just randomly hit you. You know, I was a short, skinny dude growing up, you know what I mean? I didn't get this height until later in life. And, you know, it took me a while, and I was just like, I would talk to teachers and shit like that, but at some point I would like, yo, man, get the fuck away from me, you know, shit like that.
How'd you learn how to fight?
Actually, the first fight, I got jumped. And when I went home and told my parents, my dad was like, I don't need you walking in here crying and telling me some shit that happened to you. What I'm gonna need you to do is man up and learn how to defend yourself. So at some point, he got me with this martial arts instructor. And this martial arts instructor showed me different things to do for a cat that was my size, you know, skinny as I was. So that's kind of where that came into play.
Was it helpful?
It was definitely helpful, and it taught me a lot of discipline.
When it came to these fights, I imagine it was you more so defending yourself than initiating them.
Absolutely.
What was the, when it came to the fights, what was the most, I want to see how I want to describe this question or state this question. What was the most craziest thing, I guess, that would result after a fight was over? So when I say craziest, let me be a little more specific. I've heard some stories, I should say, rather, doing these type of interviews where, you know, two people get into a fight, one person's defending themselves, but when they were caught in the fight, the person that was defending themselves ended up getting in trouble, possibly expelled, has to go to a different school, and they were just defending themselves. But because, you know, somebody is actually fighting, seeing two people fight, they're seeing, oh, this person is the person that's fighting, we're going to charge them with, I guess, expulsion. But they were really defending themselves. So that's what I mean. What was the craziest outcome with any of these fights that you got involved with, if it even got that far in that example I provided?
Right. One of my last fights I had, I believe I was either late in my middle school years or early in high school, and I got into it with a dude who just would not leave me alone. And like one day I tried to ignore it and let the shit go, but I realized, I said, this dude ain't gonna stop until this really goes here. He's not gonna respect me. So the next day I say, don't do that shit no more. He did it again. We ended up fighting and we both get sent to the principal's office. His parents come to pick him up and my aunt and uncle brought my dad up there. Like I say, my dad was blind. He couldn't drive. He had to be, driven around. Coming to find out, my family knew his family. So it was like, the principal was like, well, I'm still gonna suspend both of y'all. Y'all can both come back, but I want you, but we all sat down and had a conversation like right before we came back. And the principal, the teacher, everybody that was involved in the situation was like, man, we passed this situation, we over it. That was like the craziest outcome. Like you never know, like the person picking on you may be related to somebody that know your people. So that right there was real crazy.
But never ended up getting suspended, or you did get suspended for that?
Yeah, we did, but it was only like a 3-day suspension.
In-school suspension.
Right.
So did you ever get expelled for a fight?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Did any of these fights that you got into result in bodily harm?
Absolutely. I remember one time I was just standing outside having a conversation with some friends of mine, and the dude walked up, just got to swinging on me, and he picked me up and threw me into this brick wall, and the back of my head hit the brick wall, and they had to take me to the hospital and make sure I didn't have any like head damage or brain damage or anything like that. And my parents wanted to sue the school, but they couldn't afford no attorney, man. Like I say, we were poor growing up, so that was the result of that. When I came back, I realized he had gotten expelled for doing what he did. So, that was how that ended.
Now, it also sounds like when it came to the bullying stuff, you would try to let it go or not get into a physical altercation if you could avoid it.
Absolutely.
How often would that work, avoiding something before it got physical? How often would that method work?
Well, with me, the way I would do it, and I actually asked like a cousin of mine for this that lived on the other side of town, you know what I mean? I rarely saw him, but I asked him, I said, hey, yo, bro, how would you deal with this situation? He was like, let me tell you something, man. If they just making fun of you, just talking about your clothes, your hair, whatever it is, you being dark skinned, you being skinny, they ain't threatened you yet. Laugh it off. If they see you in on a joke, you ain't taking it personally, it might not have to get physical. But if they see you getting pissed off, they may feel threatened by that. They get pissed off. Now it's looking like shit is for to get physical. But for the most part, when he taught me that and I started doing that, that's when I noticed like people back then, I don't know how bullying is for these kids in school now, but back then, if it's just a little joke or some shit, let it go. Until somebody get physical with you, ain't no point in you getting physical with them. You can walk away.
Now, do you have kids at this present time?
No, sir.
You don't?
Nah.
And like you mentioned, bullying may be different now than it was when you were growing up.
Right.
Now, not only does someone maybe verbally bullied, emotionally bullied, physically bullied, you have cyberbullying these days. So you could get bullied in a vast amount of ways. But I don't know. Let's say you did have a kid, right?
Right.
And or maybe a kid comes to you for some knowledge or some advice.
Right.
And it comes to bullying, and there are news stories of young kids that have committed suicide because of bullying, which is the most drastic consequence that could stem from bullying. And when two kids fight, somebody could really hurt themselves.
Absolutely.
We've heard of those stories too.
Yeah.
So what do you say to somebody watching this that might be a kid and wants to know how to handle bullying and they're being bullied? They're on that end of the spectrum, like you were at one point in life.
Right. If you're at school and you're being bullied, if certain things, people are giving you a certain energy, don't be afraid to go tell somebody, like whether it's a campus police officer, tell the teachers, the principal. Don't worry about being labeled no snitch or no shit like that. Y'all kids in school, y'all ain't in a dope game. It ain't that serious. Go tell somebody, that way this shit can stop. If it's mental or emotional, learn how to be strong enough to ignore certain shit. Like a joke, like you're not above someone cracking a joke on you. They're not trying to bring you down because they don't like you. They may not even fucking know you. Like as far as this cyberbullying shit, log off your log off your computer. You can block some people. That's why they got block buttons on like Instagram, Facebook. You don't have to be everybody's friend. And just because somebody say some shit don't mean it's true. Learn how to overlook some shit. Like if you're a kid watching this, your favorite rapper, your favorite athlete, at some point they probably dealt with the same thing. They were smart enough to ignore that and not let that get the best of them, because they realize even when you reach a high level of success, you can't control the shit people gonna say about you. It takes a strong person, and if you ain't strong at that point in your life, you definitely not gonna be strong enough to ignore some shit somebody say about you on like a YouTube channel, or you think you're gonna come in this game, be a rapper, everybody gonna like your music? Nah, they gonna say shit about you. So learn how to deal with that shit early in life. That way, once you get to a certain position, man, I don't give a fuck what people think of me. I'm just gonna do me. I'm happy. So, but if shit do get physical, that's definitely when you need to say something.
There would be times where you would alert somebody when you were younger about the bullying that was going on?
Absolutely. Now, I will say this like I kind of just said a while ago. It wouldn't be right. Like my dad at the time, I couldn't come home, man. They were joking on me for being skinny or joking on me for being dark skinned. He don't want to hear that shit. Like, little nigga, man the fuck up. So he gonna tell you, they threw hands, they put hands on you, they touch you, they throw some shit at you. If they didn't, he said, well, don't worry about that shit. You ain't there for that. Focus on getting them grades up, homie. Worry about that shit, period. So, but once shit got physical, I would at first say something, because I know if I fight, we both could be in trouble, and you don't want that on your record. You don't want to get behind in your classes. You fuck around, got to go to summer school, shit like that. You don't want that. But if it gets physical, definitely your first move should be tell that person to stop, go say something to an authority figure.
Whenever you said something to an authoritative figure, did that work?
Sometimes it did, but sometimes it didn't. So when I realized it wouldn't work, I would tell even more people. Like, that's not the only authority figure you could tell. Like, go tell as many people as you can. Let them know. People can't help you if they don't know something's going on.
Now, you were bullied. Did you at one point ever become a bully yourself to others?
Absolutely not.
And that can sometimes happen.
Yeah. I don't understand that kind of shit. That's the biggest contradiction, the hypocritical move anybody can make.
Now, I want to break some other elements down of what we discussed at this point. There was a point when you were adopted.
Right.
Do you remember? I don't know if you stated what age that was during this interview when it happened.
Like, they did everything while I was soon as I was giving up, the minute I was born, my biological parents never changed my diaper, none of that shit. Like I say, I grew up thinking my adopted parents were my real parents. So it's like, whatever they discussed as far as the court system and all that, I didn't know nothing about that.
And both of your adoptive parents, they were blind by the time you were given to them.
Absolutely. They're from an older generation. My adopted parents were born in the 40s and the 50s. They were old enough to be my grandparents. So yeah, by the time I got to them, they were already, blind and dealing with the things they were dealing with.
Now, were you the only child that they've ever adopted?
Now, I have a younger brother, and they adopted him, right after they got me, 4 or 5 years after they got me. As soon as he was born, it was pretty much the same thing. As soon as he was born, he was given to us, and I had a little brother.
Was it from the same set of biological parents?
Absolutely not. His parents were from totally different people.
Did the adoptive parents you had, did they have biological children previous to adopting you two?
Absolutely not. They physically could not have children for some reason, which is why they, got into the aspect of adopting children. They wanted to raise children.
Was there ever a caseworker involved?
Never.
When did you find out about your biological parents?
I found out about my biological parents in elementary school. I would see my mother around the hood, doing what prostitutes do, different shit like that. I wasn't ashamed of her. I just accepted it for what it was. And I just looked at it like, if I was, raised by her, man, I'd probably be in an even worse situation than I am now. But I found out about her, and my adopted parents told me, that's your actual birth mother. And I'm like, oh, for real? I'm like, I thought you were my birth mother. Nah, that's your birth mother. We adopted you from them. But, she would speak to me when she would see me around. With my dad, the day I met my biological dad, it was crazy, man. I remember walking home from the store. My adopted parents had sent me down the street in the hood to the store. And as I'm walking, I see this Cadillac pull up. And it's an older guy, you know, face full of, you know, facial hair. He says, "Hey, little boy, you know who I am?" I said no, and I kept walking. He pulls up next to me again. "You don't know who I am?" I'm like, "Nah, man, leave me alone." And I take off running. I get home and I tell my adopted dad, I say, "Dad," I thought my biological dad was trying to kidnap me. So I tell my adopted dad, and he was like, "Go in your uncle's room and get your uncle and tell him to come on out. We need to talk. We need to handle this in the event this is somebody trying to do something to hurt you." So there's a knock on the door, and it's him. And I'm like, "Oh, shit, man, what did this dude want? I don't know this dude." So I go in my bedroom, and I hide out, and I'm listening. I'm quiet. I don't know what's going to happen. Next thing you know, my uncle come get me. "Joe, come on out that bedroom." That's when my adopted dad and my uncle sat me down and they explained, "This is your biological father." And quite natural, and I wasn't trying to be hurtful and no shit like that. I say, "I thought you were my real dad." He was like, "Nah, I adopted you from him. This is your real father." And I say, "Oh, how you doing, man? Nice to meet you." I didn't hold no grudge against him or nothing like that. I just, you know, the introduction seemed kind of shady. But so he just left me some money and just walked away, and I didn't see him again for a long time.
So it sounds like, I don't want to have an assumption here, but did your biological parents have a good relationship with your adoptive parents? Did they remain in contact all this time as you were growing up?
Absolutely not. My biological dad lived on the other side of town. He was still selling drugs, I guess. And like I say, I rarely saw this guy. Like there were times I remember telling somebody if I see him, he'd have to reintroduce himself to me again because I won't recognize his face. And like I said, I would just see my mom around the hood, and she would just, "Hey, you all right?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm all right." "All right then, that's it." Wasn't no communication. They never had each other's phone numbers. It was just when we cross paths, we speak. And I remember the day I graduated high school, my biological dad came over to the house, said congratulations, gave me some money, walked out, and I never saw him again, man. Yeah.
What about your mother?
She had died like 2 summers before that, like right around the time of my 16th birthday. So that just was what it was.
Do you know how she passed away?
Yeah, she died of full-blown AIDS.
You don't have AIDS?
Absolutely not.
How did you find out about it? About her passing away and then passing away from AIDS?
Right. Again, my uncle told me to hop in the car. "We're going to go see your biological mother." She lived in like a project around the corner from where I was at. So I go around there. He takes me around there, and I noticed she was like, you know, just laying in the bed. "How you been doing?" She was kind of weak, kind of sickly. I didn't know what was going on. I'm like, I've been doing all right. She was like, "You doing good in school?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm a straight A student right now." She was like, "All right, well, just know I love you and I want the best for you." I was like, "All right." After that, I'm thinking that was it. I didn't know something was going on. You know what I mean? Like, but I could tell. Like, I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but I just know she's not at 100%. So, a few weeks later, my adopted parents tell me, "You know, your mom died, right?" I say, "Oh, for real? Damn, that's messed up." They was like, "You want to know why?" I'm like, "What happened?" "Well, she had full-blown AIDS." I'm like, "Word?" She was like, "Yeah, that's how she died, man." I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, like, your uncle finna take you shopping to buy some clothes so you can wear to her funeral. You're going to a funeral." Like, they didn't ask if I wanted to go, they made me go to this funeral. So I get there, I wasn't really hurt by it because I didn't know her, but, you know, somebody dying of that is, you know, it's still sad nonetheless.
You mentioned that she was doing prostitution.
Right.
When you would see her in your hood, you knew back then she was doing prostitution, or this was something you learned after the fact?
I knew something was going on. I'm like, either she's on drugs or she's selling her body, like just the way she would dress and stuff like that. But I didn't pay it no never mind because, like I say, we didn't have a relationship. We weren't close. We never really held a conversation. It was just outside of her on her deathbed, "How you doing in school?" But like I say, she was just, "Hey." I'm like, "Oh, how you doing?" And that was it. It's not like, you know, when I would walk to school, we would just sit there and hold these long hour conversations. No. So But when I found out, I was like, I'm not really bothered by it. She's a grown woman. She gonna do what she want to do anyway, whether I'm bothered by it or not. So it just was what it was.
But how did you get confirmation of it? Was it just the assumption of the way she was dressing, or?
My adopted dad told me, and he, he's one of these, he was one of these kind of people that will tell you, like, he won't just offer you no information, but if you ask him a question, he's gonna tell you the cold hard truth. He was like, yeah, your mama out there selling her body. I'm like, damn, that's fucked up. But, I was like, well, I mean, that just is what it is. So she a grown woman, let her do her thing.
Sorry for the pause here. I have so many questions. I don't know what to ask you next, because we could go into different avenues here on the facet of your life. But when it comes to your parents, you never held a grudge against them?
Not at all.
Why not? Some people do.
It's hard for me to hold a grudge against someone that I don't know. Like, you have some people, I hate my parents for abandoning me. Well, yeah, they did it. They abandoned me. That's true. But I look at it like, had I been raised by them, who's to say my life wouldn't have turned out worse? You know what I mean? Like, and again, my adopted dad, even after he had got shot and went blind, still had people hustling in the streets for him up until he stopped. And, that's when I was coming of age and I realized, damn, life is fucked up. We poor, we broke. We living off they disability and their social security checks because my adopted parents never worked. But I just felt like I can't say I loved my biological parents, but I can't hate them either. I feel like you can't logically love or hate anybody you never got to know. Like, that makes no sense at all to me. So it's not like my biological parents were abusive or they did some shit to me. Nah. And if I have to choose between your abandonment and your abuse, I would take your abandonment any day of the week. So that's how I looked at it.
Hindsight 2020, though, do you think that was the right decision of your parents to give you to adoption to somebody else that could take care of you when they did?
Without a shadow of a doubt. That was the best thing that ever happened to me in my life.
When it comes to your adoptive parents, what was that like growing up in a household where they're blind, you're not?
It was a harsh reality to accept as a child, and it's like you learn you have to be their caregiver. Like, they didn't have an actual caregiver in the house. And like I say, my dad wasn't always blind. He had, traveled and did different things. He was in the streets, so he wasn't no square. He wasn't like naive to the harsh realities of life. You know what I mean? He was a very wise guy. He was very hard on me. He didn't take no shit. He was just, though he wasn't in the military, he kind of felt like that. Like, he didn't cut me no slack. And I guess kind of like James from, like, JJ's father from Good Times. You know what I mean? That's kind of the vibe my dad gave off. And, my mother was like, her parents had her like heavily in the church and all that stuff, whereas my dad had ran the streets. They were from two totally different worlds. But by the time they met and all that, she had kind of calmed him down, and he wanted to be there for me. And when my younger brother came in the mix, and he didn't want to, stay in the dope game and have some shit happen and take himself away from his family. Now, myself and most human beings like that are just, not dealing with a serious disability, we go to a regular school. My adopted parents did too, but they also went to a school for the blind that teach them how to read Braille, how to iron your clothes without burning yourself, how to cook, how to clean, how to do different stuff. So that's kind of how my actual adopted parents met. They met at that school for the blind. So it was like being around them, I realized they're gonna need me as much as I needed them. That was the one thing that I realized, and my adopted dad would always tell me. At some point, he got heavily into the church as well. He says, God knew we needed you and you needed us. There's a reason we're in each other's lives. So it was like certain things, like he'll call me in a room, count this money for me and tell me exactly how much it is. He didn't play that lying to his face and all that other shit. He didn't play that. He was a big guy too, 6'5", 300 pounds. So I was very intimidated. Even though he was blind, he was a very intimidating man. So, he taught me how to count money early. My mom taught me certain things early. And it's like, Whereas other kids could go out and enjoy their childhood outside with their friends, I couldn't really do that. I had to be around for my parents up until the point to where like an aunt or uncle would move in, then I could go do other stuff. That's what it was like.
And that did happen. An aunt or uncle did move in to help out?
An aunt or an uncle or just a friend of the family, or sometimes some of the dudes that were moving at work for my old man would come live with us. And a part of me was kind of afraid of that because I was like, yo, you trust this dude or whatever? And he was like, he all right, don't worry about him. He worked for me and I'm helping him, so don't worry about him. And in the defense of these people, they never did nothing like out of line to me, but I did see a lot of shit. So that's just what it was.
Did you yourself have to learn Braille or any of those type of aspects?
Absolutely not. Like I was my parents' eyes, for everything, but I never had to learn Braille and, stuff like that. I would just have to like assist my mom in the kitchen whenever she needed stuff, like, what seasoning is this? Tell me, stuff like that. That's what I would have to do.
And your father, he was blind in both eyes.
Absolutely. My mother was too.
And when it came to growing up with two parents that were blind, what do you think was the hardest or toughest thing you had to deal with out of all things considered?
It was a lot of pressure when certain people would come around, and like I felt I became very overprotective. Like the roles were kind of reversed. Like most parents are overprotective of their children. And although me and my adopted dad, we had our ups and downs. We didn't always see eye to eye. But I was very protective of him and my mother. Like when it came to like people, like money exchanges, them buying stuff, I was always there. And, like a lot of times, like my mother had a walking cane just like my dad did. And, they had a walking cane, but they would have to hold on to my arm and I would have to guide them around. And like I said, I didn't like certain jokes I learned to just deal with. I developed thick skin, but like when I had to go to school for like open house, I don't know if they still do that in school or not now, but I know for like open house, I just remember being like a nervous, insecure wreck all the time. Like, man, these are the same kids in school that make fun of me. I really don't want them fucking with me about my parents. That shit gonna really piss me off. Like, I ain't gonna cry. I'm gonna get mad. I'm gonna wanna throw them hands. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's just the frame of mind it put me in. So, that was a challenge. That right there was probably the biggest challenge. And like, when you in the hood, my mom needs to go different places. It's like, you have to be there. And I never told her this until like right before she died. But, I would keep weapons on me, man, to protect her. Even as a kid, like screwdrivers, knives, box cutters. It's like, you come over here, man, I'm gonna have to do what I'm gonna have to do. And it ain't just about me. I'm protecting her and I'm protecting him. Those were the challenges.
Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, and I ask you this respectfully, if that was the hardest or the toughest part, on the opposite end of the spectrum, what would be the best way to say it, but what would be the best part, if you could say there's a best part, or the most fulfilling part, or the silver lining about growing up with two blind parents? If there is one. I don't know if there is, but if there is something on the opposite end of the spectrum of the toughest, the hardest, what would that answer be?
Oh, wow. That's a deep question, my man. Like, one of the things I learned, like, how, like, you realize, like, when one person has a disability, like a significant disability, like, in one of their senses, the other senses become way more stronger. And it was like the things they would teach me, like, my dad would just teach me a lot. Although he couldn't see, like, the wisdom he would bestow upon me, the other family members, like, those were just things, because again, he was worldly, you know what I mean? Like, he had saw the world. And I can honestly say this, although he was hard on me and so was she, that love was always there. I knew once I stepped in that house, even if it was tough love, that love was there. I felt safe, I felt protected, you know what I mean? Like, wasn't no bullying going down in that house. It was just outside of that house. So I had love and support. Even if they didn't agree with some of my interests and stuff like that, they would still support me unless it was something crazy and illegal I was about to do.
Your father was able to see at one point, then the drug transaction situation, he became blind. Did you say how your mother, your adoptive mother, was blind?
Yes, when she was 5 years old, she went blind because of a tumor.
That's right, okay.
Yeah, on her optic nerve.
I got you. and that caused both eyes, not just one eye.
Right.
Okay. You did state that earlier. Sorry, we talked about so many things that kind of slipped my mind there.
That's good.
Let's say somebody's watching this, hearing your story, and maybe they're in a position where they are dealing with a blind parent, okay? Maybe just one, not both like in your case, or maybe both like in your case. Obviously, circumstances could be different for everybody.
Right.
But is there anything you would say to somebody that has to deal with a blind parent?
Don't look at having a blind parent as a burden on you. It's not a burden on you. Look at it as like it's a blessing. You know what I mean? Like in a crazy way, it's a blessing because that's still your parent. They're still your, they're still the person taking care of you. They're your guardian. Like it's, you know what I mean? Like certain people are gonna, be sympathetic to your dilemma if you choose to divulge that information to them. But you know what I mean? Especially like when, like if you say, yo, one of my parents has a disability, they're blind, and they see you out with them, like that person, like the energy, you'll get like this sympathetic energy from people. As cold-hearted and as cruel as this world is and the people in this world can be, you'll see a softer side of people. Don't look at it as a burden, look at it as an opportunity for you to be a blessing to your parent.
They were married?
They were married.
And you mentioned your adoptive mother did pass away.
Absolutely.
What about your adoptive father?
He passed away 4 years before she did.
And how did each pass?
His health was just naturally deteriorating, diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. And like I say, he was a big guy. And like growing up in the hood, like a lot of times our eating habits are not the best. I know everybody's like in this generation, we're on this health kick, this vegan situation. He wasn't on that at all. So it was just old age and just a combination of health, defects that took him out. My mother, the same tumor that blinded her as a little girl came back, and that's what caused her untimely demise.
And do you remember what age you were when they passed?
When he died, I believe I was 20 years old. And when she died, I believe I was like 24, maybe 25.
Did you appreciate growing up in a two-parent household?
I did. I must say I did.
And what do you think their secret of staying together was?
He was born in 1943. She was born in 1957. They are from a generation where people actually married for the right reasons, like for love, respect, loyalty. And mind you, when they both met, they were already blind. So he couldn't look at her and say, she's not my type. She couldn't look at him and say, I don't like the way he look, or he's too big. Or that was genuine love. He didn't have money like that. Like I say, once he got out the drug game and he calmed down, it wasn't about none of that. Like they genuinely loved each other for who they were. And like I say, later on, they both, got heavily into spirituality and stuff like that. But they were loyal to each other. And I personally believe they knew deep down inside they needed each other, not just for each other, but for myself and my younger brother as well.